may need to watch it after. Or if people have to leave, then they can review the recording as well. Okay. All right. My name is Maris Alfonso. I'm the Information Security Lead at InfoExchange and part of the digital transformation team at InfoExchange as well. Thank you to Parry for reaching out to our team at InfoExchange to conduct this cybersecurity awareness webinar for the staff at Whittlesea Community Connections on what's a really pertinent topic. So as I said, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to allow your staff to watch it at a later date. And if you have questions as we go, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. We've got 30 minutes allocated, but happy to go past that if required. Okay, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So welcome everyone to this webinar on Cybersecurity 101. An agenda of what we'll cover is on the slide here, and you would have seen it in the document that we sent through as well. So just a view of the current cybersecurity threats facing organizations, the top 5 things all not-for-profit staff must know to keep their organization's data safe, a high-level overview of imperative measures every organization must have in place, and some resources and reference links, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. And as I said, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat and I'll get to them at the end. So information security practices are no longer a nice to have, given the increasing nature of a digital footprint and online presence and increasing threats. We must build security resilience into our organizations. So security has been in the headlines every month, the last year and beyond, before that, with a number of organizations across all sectors of the economy being affected. So a view of some of the headlines within the community services sector and government as well from the past year on this slide. So on the top left, Oxfam had donor information of over 1 million Australians disclosed via data breach when a database was accessed via a security incident. On the right there, the incident in March involved a caseworker who worked at a community services organization and had access to an IT system provided by the Department of Health and Human Services. After leaving the position, his access to the system was not revoked, so it was not removed, and he accessed confidential information related to children and committed sex offences. On the bottom there, Uniting Care in Queensland had an attack on some of its IT systems and had to resort to manual workarounds due to IT systems being inaccessible, so paper-based workarounds. On the top there, an incident experienced by Uniting Communities where staff were unable to access certain systems due to a cyber incident, again, would have required manual workarounds and change in business process because an IT system that they relied on was not available. And the last one on the bottom there is fairly recent from November last year, linked to the My SA government IT system where individuals' accounts were accessed via stolen passwords. This was possible because people had used the same password across online IT systems, and when one of these systems was compromised and their passwords obtained, the same passwords gave access to My SA government accounts and hence details such as driver's license numbers, which are a key piece of identity information. So as you can see, the impacts of incidents from cyber attacks vary. In some cases, data is inaccessible due to it being locked up by what is known as ransomware. In other cases, personal information is disclosed via a data breach, could result in identity theft, and so on. All right, some recent statistics on scam, cybercrime, and data breaches in Australia. The data points are important to review because they highlight what's going on in the landscape. So on the top left there, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, points out that it's very common for scammers to utilize current events and crises to make their scams appear more legitimate. We saw this in 2020 when scammers used the bushfire emergency, and then last year and the year before with the COVID-19 pandemic as a basis for new scams. Some statistics there are with losses of over $850 million in 2020 to scams. A statistic from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre in the middle bubble there, the recent cyber threat report from the 2020-2021 financial year indicates there have been over 67,500 cybercrime reports, and this equates to 1 every 8 minutes. On the top right, from the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, they received 446 notifications under what is called the Notifiable Data Breach Scheme. And this is over the period January to June 2021. Now, this NDB scheme was established in 2018 to improve consumer protection and drive better security standards for protecting personal information. So if a data breach of personal information occurs within an organization that's bound by the Privacy Act and there's a risk of serious harm to individuals, then this breach must be reported to the Information Commissioner as well as to the individuals who could be affected. So these increasing events in our headlines and statistics on cybercrime are indeed a call to action for organizations to review their cybersecurity practices. All right, a key message is that the human element is significant in the delivery of security in today's organizations. So the human element is that people component. So for example, for staff to be aware of certain processes on how to securely share certain types of information or how to use technology securely by creating a strong password. Security behaviors and the culture and sentiment and security within an organization are greatly influenced by you and your perception of risk. And most importantly, these perceptions can be changed. Security is really everybody's responsibility. It's not just an IT responsibility or an executive responsibility. Every staff member has a role to play. All right, before we get into the content on the top 5 things to keep your organization's data safe, I wanted to mention the Australian Cybersecurity Centre website as a key resource. So it's cyber.gov.au. There's some really useful guidance there on how to protect yourself online from an organizational as well as a personal perspective. I'm sure many of you have children who've been doing remote learning over the last years or who spend a lot of time online. There's a lot of guidance there in terms of personal protection and protection for children as well. So do visit this website to learn more about how you can protect yourself online. And it's in the resources section of the slides at the end, but it's also cyber.gov.au. Another point to reference, it's Safer Internet Day next Tuesday, the 8th of February. Now, Safer Internet Day is a global initiative, and in Australia, the e-Safety Commissioner provides a range of resources to raise awareness about online safety within families, organizations, and schools. So again, I encourage you to visit the website for more information. The link's on the screen here, but it's also in the resources section at the end. All right, let's get into the top 5 things you must know to keep your organization's data safe. The first one, know how to spot a phishing email. So you may have heard about phishing emails, but these are emails that are sent with the aim of tricking the person who receives the email into clicking a link, opening an attachment, or giving up some of their personal information. So in this particular example, one of our staff members received this email about messages that could not be delivered. It said, your mailbox is full. Maybe we couldn't deliver these messages. Please click on this review button to release these messages. Now, if you look at the time on this email, it's pretty early in the morning on a Tuesday. It may have been one of the first emails they saw as they were flicking through their inbox that morning. So they clicked on the review button. They were presented with what looked like a standard, SharePoint in this case, or if it's Office 365, a standard login page with their username already filled, and they entered in their password. At that point, they've given up their password. Now, the fortunate thing in this case was that we had multi-factor authentication, which is that additional factor employed. And so even though they'd given up their password, the account could not be compromised because they had this multi-factor authentication enabled. The staff member was still asked to change their password regardless. Now, if you look at the email here, the red outlines of the boxes, the email address looks suspicious. It's got a .de extension. That's not even, anything related to Office 365 or linked to Australia. If you look at the link just above the review button here, it does look suspicious. So these are some of the telltale signs of a phishing email that you should be aware of. Another example, this is an example of what's called business email compromise, which has seen an uptick or an increase in Australia as a method used to compromise individuals and organizations. This request was received by a payroll department, and it looked like it came from a staff member requesting a change of their bank details for their pay. So initially, the payroll department responded, saying, yes, please send me your new details. The payroll officer didn't notice the from email address. And it's only when they received the second email that due to the grammar in the email, they sort of realized that this doesn't, and they knew the person who was sending it because the person had signed off their name. It looked like it came from them as far as the signature in the email. They said the grammar doesn't look right. They picked up the phone and they asked the staff member, did you send me this email? And the staff member said, no, I didn't. And again, if you look at the from email address, you can see it's directoronly.com. It had nothing to do with the organization's domain name or email addresses. This one is fairly recent, just from December last year. Again, received by a staff member saying, here's your invoice. There was an attachment. Please pay up. You can see it's a huge amount of money, 107,000 US dollars. It would be tempting in this case to click on the attachment to see what it's about, but in this particular case, there may be malicious software that would be within that attachment that could be installed on your machine if you clicked on it. So these are the sorts of phishing emails that we've seen with attachments, links, attempts to get your password, and it's really important to be aware of these and pay attention to the signs. Again, if you look at the from address, it's a .de. May not be relevant to what we were doing for business, so important to pay attention. Now, this is a useful poster which highlights the general attributes of what to look for in a phishing email. So note that not all of these may apply because phishing emails can have different intentions. So with phishing, the attacker uses social engineering principles to trick the person into performing an action. So these principles might be a sense of urgency or scarcity, for example. So if you look at the screen here, the message is that you are eligible for a tax refund, and it looks like it comes from the Australian Tax Office. And who wouldn't like that? It would be really enticing to click on that link, but it's important to take note of the telltale signs in the email. If you look at, the from address, it's atogov.com. All gov addresses would end in .gov. And there's an urgent call to action. The deadline is Friday. You must do it now. So these are some of the signs that should look out for within emails. And while this poster references what to watch out for in an email, the same technique is used to get people into clicking on links in text messages or messaging apps, or even giving information up via phone calls. So these other means are prevalent, not just email. So always be aware of what you're asked to do or click on with any use of technology. Another one we're seeing these days is the use of QR codes, because people are using them a lot to check into locations. So there have been malicious actors who've been taking advantage of that as well. So it's really important to pay attention to these. Okay, now we have a poll with 2 questions, and it's the topic of can you spot a fish? So I've got 2 slides, and these were taken from the Australia Competition and Consumer Commission ScamWatch quiz. This is the first question. You received this email from MyGov asking you to verify your identity. What would you do? So I'll give everyone some time just to look over the slide, and then I'll pop up the poll, and if it should appear on your screen, and if you can select one of the options will be the same as the 2 you see on the slide. That would be great. So I'm launching the poll now. You should have a pop-up on your screen, and just select one of the options and click the submit button or done. Has that come up for people? Yeah, oh great. I'll give everybody another 5 seconds. Okay, Great, I can see the responses coming in. If you look in the chat window of this meeting, you should be able to see the responses yourself as well. I can see we've got 22 responses. 23. Okay, great. Looks like majority have selected delete the email, it's a scam, and that's correct. The Australian government will never ask you to follow a link in an email or SMS to verify your identity. Another sign is that the sender's email address is noreply@aussie.com, and it's supposed to be the Australian government, so that wouldn't be right. And all government agency addresses would typically end in .gov.au. Another way to check would be to hover your mouse over the link that's within this message and to see what it looks like. Is it a .gov.au address? Okay, thank you for that. I've got another poll now. So this second question, your boss sends you this email. What would you do? So again, I'll give you a minute or so just to look over the email and I'll pop up the poll as before with the two options. Okay, launching the poll.
We can't see the email yet, or I have a delay.
I think it should be coming up now. Can you see it now? Yeah, great. I've got 9 responses. That's great. I can see the majority of people selecting ignore the email and contact IT, and that is correct. So the sender's address, if you look carefully, the I in the word services, it's not easy to spot. But the I in the word services is not your typical English I. It's a different font they've used. And generally, this is a tactic that's used quite often in terms of gift card purchase. So good practice in this case would always to be, always check with your boss. It doesn't matter if they're in a meeting and they say ASAP, it's best that you check rather than action it and lose funds in the process. So the correct answer would be yes, ignore the email and maybe contact your IT support department, let them know you've received a sort of spam because maybe there's some sort of filtering that they can adjust on their email filters and the like. Okay. The second point of the top 5 that we started on is protecting information. Now, a number of data breaches happen due to human error and people not storing or sharing information securely. Information is a key asset of an organization and it has value, so it must be protected. And this is particularly true for sensitive information such as health data and client records. So if within your organization you collect information considered confidential or sensitive by certain industry standards or laws, you must take reasonable measures to protect it. So for personal information, you should collect only the information you need for a particular purpose. Ensuring sensitive data such as health data and client records is stored within a certain system, like a client and case management system, for example, because that system would have certain protections around it, like the need for strong passwords. Another measure would be ensuring that there's awareness among volunteers and staff on how certain types of information is to be handled and communicated. And if personal information is stored on a laptop, it's important to ensure your laptop is encrypted. That may be a question to ask your IT support provider, your IT department. Okay, third point is on using good password practice. Now, a good password may be based on a phrase that you know. You could compose the password by picking out the first letter of each word, capitalize some letters, add in some digits. You may also hear the term passphrase as opposed to password. And what that is, it's just 4 or more random words that are strung together or put together to make a password. Okay, so it's really important to have a strong password for the systems that you use. And it's important to keep your personal details like your name, your date of birth, etc., out of it. It's also important not to reuse passwords, because if a password is compromised from one system and it's been used on another, it's easy for an attacker or hacker to get into this other system. And we saw that in the headlines that we saw with the My SA government incident. If you need to write down passwords, store them securely. Don't put it on a post-it note on your screen. And if you have too many passwords to remember, consider a good password manager. There's a couple that are free that are out there. Now, if you don't have multi-factor authentication implemented, it's very important that this is planned for the organization's key IT systems. And I think Parry's indicated that this is on the organization's plan, which is great, because many of the incidents we see at the moment are taking advantage of the fact that IT systems don't have this additional factor. And people are reusing passwords, or they have weak passwords, and this is how systems are compromised and data is obtained. So multi-factor authentication, or MFA as it's also known, is the practice of using a password and another factor to log into an account. So some examples of apps that would be on a smartphone are here. You have Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, and there's a few others that you could use for a token for multi-factor authentication. Another practice, as far as good password practice, is not to share IT system accounts and passwords. But understandably, this is not always possible, particularly if you have volunteers within your organization. So what you can do in that case is, if you do share accounts, be cautious of how you share the password. Make sure it's only shared with those who need to know it. If somebody's got access to that password and they leave the organization, change the password. That's what you can do if you can't get around not having to share accounts. Okay, the fourth thing to be aware of is to keep your device secure. And this is in a physical sense, as well as in terms of securing the software on your device. So physically protect it means don't leave it out in the car, when you're out and about for others to see. It's good practice to lock your screen when you step away from your device, because in this case, any information you have open, if you've got personal information on your screen, that's protected if your screen is locked. And at this time, many people are working remotely. If your PC is used by children, for example, be aware of what they're doing on the PC. If they install software such as games, sometimes these can have malicious software components installed also. If they're accessing online games, again, there's the risk of visiting websites or clicking on links that could have malicious software downloaded onto your machine. And it's really important to keep your device up to date, which means the operating system and applications such as web browsers. If you get prompts to update these from your operating system, make sure you follow those, because otherwise systems have vulnerabilities, software has holes in it, and that's what's taken advantage of to compromise systems. There's a number of organizations who report security breaches because they're using infected home PCs as well without the appropriate protection. So make sure there's an understanding within the organization of what is permitted and what is not. On the point of bring your own device, or BYOD as it's called, such as a mobile phone or other device that you may use for work, a home PC, only store information that your organization is comfortable for you to store, and ensure the device has appropriate security controls. If it's a mobile phone, you have a PIN or a passcode, you have security updates that are installed, and maybe you might have remote wipe capability as well. All right, the last point, as far as the top 5, is to report anything you're not sure about. Security incidents are adverse events which pose a threat to an organization's information systems and services, and they can stem from a variety of sources. So some examples are on this slide. Unfamiliar activity on your device. It may be an indication there's malicious software installed, or disclosure of information, personal information, to somebody who shouldn't have it. Lost devices or lost USB keys that might have your organization's information. And the last one there, probably not so relevant now if many people are still working remotely, but if you see people on premise who you don't know, ask them, can I help you? So ensure you know who to report potential incidents to within your organization. There should be a contact point. We can have all the protections in place, but one of the resilience measures is to make sure we can respond as well. If something we're not sure of, we see something we're not sure of, we should have that capability as well. And the Australian Cybersecurity Centre has expanded its 24-hour call center capabilities to benefit small and medium-sized organizations. So they have a 1300 Cyber One number, and it's a useful resource if you're not sure about something from a security perspective. Okay, that ends the top 5. I just thought it'd be good to touch on some organizational processes as well that require a security lens based on the incidents that we've seen. So from a finance perspective, through the lens of what we discussed earlier with business email compromise and the attempt to get funds diverted, whether it's to, via payroll or a supplier, ensuring delegations of authority are appropriate within your organization and reviewed regularly. Large amounts of spend require double signatures, and verify change of bank account details via alternate channels. So pick up the phone and call the supplier. Did you send me this invoice? I'll visit their website directly. Don't follow the channels that would be in an email if there's any sign that you're not sure about something. As from a human resources perspective, onboarding, offboarding activities are conducted in a timely manner. So when staff leave, you terminate their access and you remove their access from key IT systems. Conducting refresher training, as we're doing now, is also important. And also, if things go wrong, make sure that there's a grateful approach instead of a punitive one. Just an overview of top security incident entry points. These are taken from a data breach investigations report of May last year, and this is what's seen around the globe, so impacting organizations globally. Phishing emails are prevalent in terms of getting users to click on links or opening attachments. And as I mentioned as well, it's not just email, it could be SMS, voice call, and the like. Ransomware is also very high up there in terms of incidents that organizations are experiencing. And this is where your data is locked up, and you really need to have good backups in this case to be able to recover your data. Business email compromise, as I touched on earlier, just with the point on finance. Use of stolen credentials. So usernames and passwords are stolen from online services. This is where multi-factor authentication is really key. The second last one there, misconfiguration. An example, if a staff member leaves, make sure that you configure the system such that their account is removed or the access is revoked. And the last one there is misdelivery, where you have information of a sensitive nature sent to unintended recipients. These are some of the top security incident entry points currently. All right, the key takeaways for you based on what we've touched on: always use strong, unique passwords and multi-factor authentication as well on key IT systems. Be aware of phishing emails. Email addresses can be spoofed, which is a term that means they can look like they appear to come from people you know. So always it doesn't hurt to just pick up the phone or use an alternate channel and ask, did you send me this, if there's a request that the email is asking you to fulfill. Thirdly, supplier websites or bank websites can be made to look like they're real. So best practice, always visit a supplier or bank website in your web browser, not through a link in an email. And the last 4 there that are in gray are what's important for the organization to have in place and communicate to staff. So where should sensitive data be stored? As I mentioned earlier, if it's personal information of the likes of client records, make sure there's a specific system it should be stored in. Multi-factor authentication on important accounts or for key IT systems. Make sure that you're aware of your policies, what the organization expects of you from a security perspective. And the last one is a contact point within the organization to report something suspicious or if you're not sure about something. This is a listing of the useful resources. Some are from the Digital Transformation Hub. The others are what we've spoken through in terms of Safer Internet Day, some of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. Have I Been Pawned is a really useful reference. If you go there and you enter in your email address, it'll tell you if some of your details have been exposed in a data breach. It's run by a reliable security researcher, Troy Hunt. So that's a good reference to check if any of your accounts may have been compromised. And there's some other references on this slide as well. All right, we're just on 11:29, so that's all I've got. I'm happy for any questions or any clarifications on anything that we covered. Thank you.
Hi, Maurice. Thank you so much for delivering the session. It's really, really important and helpful. My main question is just around implementing security measures like MFA. So we have some teams that have a huge turnover, whether it's students or volunteers, and it's not feasible for us to invest in each of them having their own device. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions to address that?
Yeah. In that case, I'd say having a good strong password that's not reused elsewhere would be a key. So, and I think the current advice from the ACSC, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, is to have a password of at least 14 characters. And like I said, it could be a string of random words, mix it up with capital, lower, and keep it safe, and make sure it's unique, and make sure it's shared with just those people who need to have it. So the compensating control in that case, if you can't put MFA on there, is to do just that. Have a strong password, keep it just to those who need to have it. If somebody who knows it leaves, change it. Those are the sorts of things you can do.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
sure.
on that note, do you know if there are platforms, and perhaps this is too much of a general IT question, but if there are platforms that are kind of organizational password managers for these types of shared accounts, and if they have a process for updating the password automatically in that way?
There's a couple of good password managers. So there's one called LastPass. LastPass, there's Dashlane, there's 1Password. I wouldn't say they have a process that would update a password automatically. In fact, the general advice now is that passwords should not be changed regularly. That's past best practice. You'll still see some places where they say, oh, you must change your password every 90 days, but in essence, that actually contributes to people having weaker passwords, because instead of having, let's say, a 2 at the end of your password, or 1 at the end of your password 1, they'd make it password 2. So the general advice is not to change passwords regularly. Have a good, long, strong password that's not reused elsewhere. Have multi-factor authentication. If you can't have that, just have the strong password and don't reuse it. And only change the password if you know it's been compromised. That's the current advice. So as far as some of the feature sets of the password managers, they may have the capability to prompt you to change passwords, but yeah, I'm not too sure of the details of that. But those are the 3 password managers I would recommend that you could look into.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge is with the exit process for those teams that have a high turnover, where we can't just remove the access to that account. And in that case, really the only solution, I think, is to update the password, basically.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Security is all about, in a sense, it's all about hygiene. And sometimes it's because we slip through the cracks of hygiene where systems are compromised.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. Happy for any other questions?
Maris, I've got one question. Where do you see this going in kind of 5 or 10 years' time? If we were to kind of work backwards from there, where would you suggest we and we can take these steps now, but where do you see this is leading, and what can we do to be proactive about being on the front foot with this situation?
Yeah, I think the top 5 measures we talked about are not going to go away in terms of the next 5 years. One of the key pieces of advice is, for example, making sure IT systems are kept up to date, because the trend that we've seen over the years is that systems have vulnerabilities. Software is expensive to create, and as a result, we have systems that have vulnerabilities, and that's why we have updates and hot fixes and patches that come out. So one of the key things I would say, to future-proof yourself in a sense, is to make sure you have a good process to keep your IT systems up to date. And one of the recent occurrences from the ACSC threat report is that we see rapid exploitation of security vulnerabilities. They're getting really good at it. There's a vulnerability and it's not been updated. They get really good at getting in there really quickly. So having a rigorous process around that. The other one is passwords are not going to go away from the majority of organizations anytime soon. So having that password practice as well as MFA on your key IT systems is really important. That's what I would say. The other one is ransomware, data backups, really key, not just for ransomware, but in a disaster recovery sense, making sure that you've got good backups of your key IT systems. And if those are with a supplier, make sure within your contract with your supplier, there's an understanding of how your data is backed up and what you can expect from an SLA perspective. So those are the things that I would say to future-proof yourself. I hope that answers your question, Parry.
Yeah, it does. I have one other one as well. Some of the staff are getting a lot of scam calls and SMSs on their on our work phones that we've provided staff members. Have you got any insights on how we work with that situation?
One thing that I've heard of would maybe to report it to the ACCC. So they have a scam watch hotline that you can use. I'm not too sure what they would do on the back end there if it's your organizational phones, but I think reporting that and asking them for advice on what you could possibly do in that case would be a good start. And if you'd like, Perry, I can link you to the detail after this via an email.
That would be great, thanks.
Can I
Okay.
just add in there, do not call register also shouldn't have to call that on a business phone, but it takes them 1 month to be able to put a block over those numbers. I'm not sure why, but I have called them on numerous occasions for my private phone, so that might be another way around it. But unfortunately, after having called them 3 times, these people still continue to call.
Right. Is that run by the ACCC as well?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry it's taking that long, but that's what I would suggest. But then the other one, and it sounds like you're on the front foot of that, is to make sure staff are aware that these scam calls are happening. Is there something in particular that they're requesting when they make these calls? Or
Yes, there's the one of those that you mentioned before about the ATO.
right.
There's
Yeah.
one about it's one going round about. So I seem to get these scammers more than anyone else. Amazon Prime.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the work one where you get please put your personal details in, or even competition, either competition winning one where they say you've won $1,000 voucher. Please
Right.
enter your details.
Okay. Yeah, there's a few. That's what all I would suggest though in terms of Scam Watch and ACCC. But I can send you an email after, Perry.
Yeah, Perry, I keep forgetting to mention, just in the last 2 weeks, I've been getting a lot of text messages to the work phone, my work phone, saying your package is here, and then there's like a link, and I just ignore it, obviously. But I haven't had them before, but the last fortnight I've had them a lot.
Yeah, same here with the work
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
work phone.
I think you
Someone
could, from your phone, could you block the sender in that particular case? Is it just different numbers each time?
Looks like different mobile numbers.
Right.
I get about 3 of those a day at the moment, Catrice.
Yeah, it's just that we're talking about our work mobiles, not our
yeah.
personal mobiles. And I haven't had any scams previously to the last fortnight on my work mobile. So it's just interesting that it's just, I don't know if Haya, you're the same. I haven't really had any scams before.
I started. No, I had it for like the last year. That they, like that they say the package is here. Please, click here and so on and so on. And we have also AGL, a lot of scams and like using AGL account and the taxation office. Yeah, I get them both in my work and a private one. But
Right.
yeah, we ignore them. Yeah.
Yeah, what I'd suggest in that case, if you can block the sender. I mean, not something that you can keep doing it depending on how many you get, but that's one of the things I would suggest. Yeah.
Maris, do we know if these phones I think are all on prepay? Is that common practice that a prepay provider will sell the phone numbers to third parties? So for example, if we had all the phones on contract, that wouldn't be an issue. Do you have any insight to that? Because I have heard that, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
I'm not 100% sure, Perry, but relevant question, because in that case, from a direct marketing perspective, that shouldn't be the case, but it would depend on the arrangement. I'm not too sure, sorry.
I don't think so, because if Cat recently only received it and we are in a prepaid already for 2-3 years, and my other phone is paid and it's not like in a contract and I'm still receiving these things, and with Telstra, which should be the best, doesn't mean.
If I can just quickly add, Maurice did mention this website in the presentation. It's just called Have I Been pawned. Basically, it's just entering in the mobile number and the email address just to see if it's been compromised. So perhaps, Catrice, especially if you've just received a lot more of them recently, like a big change in the last 2 weeks, then I would recommend putting your number on there just to double check if it's been compromised in any way.
And even just to check it, it's a fascinating process because you'll see all the large data breaches over the last 5 to 10 years, and you'll see if your personal details or your email address has been, or phone number has been caught up in those data breaches. So it's actually quite fascinating and slightly scary.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yep.
Are you able to like revoke your data once you do that, or is it just once a system has your information, they permanently have it? Is that how it works?
I think it would depend on the specific platform. Like if it's Facebook, you can go and delete your account. But my general principle is once you've put anything on the internet, it's there to stay. So in that case, if you look at have I been pawned, it'll typically tell you what types of information may have been breached. So, if it's your phone number, your email address, then in that case, you can expect you might get some phishing emails or you might get these scams via text messages. It's just for you to be aware. In some cases, it might say, yes, your password's been breached, in which case, of course, you must change your password, put on MFA, that sort of thing. It depends very much on the platform and what types of information is on there, the sensitivity of the information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if people don't have any other questions, we'll let Maris go. And thank you very much for your presentation, your time, and thanks for letting us go outside the normal process for attending these sessions. That's much appreciated, and it's great to see we had 29 people here. So
yeah, that's no problem. Thank you for the opportunity, Parry. Happy to touch base again if there's anything additional that you would like from the Digital Transformation Hub, not just cybersecurity. But I could send you an email with the detail on ACCC ScamWatch if you like.
yeah, that would be great. Yeah, and thanks to Anas as well, because he initially kind of it was his idea to connect with Info Exchange about this matter. So
okay, great. Thank you for that. Thanks. And I'll send through the recording as well. I'll check on how I can get that to you.
Fantastic.
All right. Nice to meet you all. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.